I think I may have a kind of bombshell to throw into this commentary, but you be the judge. Point number one. As most people now know, the Secretary General of the United Nations has been forced to announce an intended inquiry into the terrible episodes of the sexual abuse of little boys in the Central African Republic committed by French peacekeeping troops. In fact, the inquiry has to be systemic and broad because the whole United Nations has to be examined in the way in which it handles sexual exploitation and abuse in peacekeeping operations. It's said that the inquiry will be external and independent. We'll see exactly whether that's possible. Point one. Point number two. The inquiry was in every sense triggered by the report of the abuse in the Central African Republic, which was compiled by two United Nations officials, one of them working for the Commission on Human Rights, the other one from UNICEF. In fact, UNICEF was present at 5 of the 6 interviews as they were conducted. And we're very familiar with it in AIDS Free World because it was our co-director, Paula Donovan, who got the report and gave it to The Guardian in the United Kingdom, from which there followed the huge international controversy and ultimately forced the hand of the Secretary General because it appeared that over the intervening year, virtually nothing was done to deal with the reports of sexual abuse, and there was mounting agitation on the part of governments, and it was clear that something had gone wrong, terribly wrong, in the Secretariat, and the Secretary General's hand was forced. That's point two. Point three is what I cannot intellectually cope with. At the press briefing in Geneva today, I'm taping this on June the 5th in the afternoon. At the press briefing in Geneva today, just a few hours ago, here's the statement, quoted verbatim, that follows from that press briefing. Responding to a question on the sexual abuse of children in the Central African Republic, Christophe Bolierek, for the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, said that on 16 July, UNICEF headquarters in New York had shared information on reported cases of abuse of children in the Central African Republic with the UN Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children and Armed Conflict. July 16th, 2014. They shared information. You know, that revolting phrase, "thank you for sharing," comes to mind. What in God's name does that mean? UNICEF is governed by the Convention on the Rights of the Child. They have an obligation to make these things public in order to protect the rights of children over the course of the intervening year. And what about the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Children and Armed Conflict? Does she have no obligation? There's not a word on her website. Incidentally, not a word on the UNICEF website about this. What happens to these people? We have a photograph, it's rather interesting, of the Conference on the Working Group Report on Sexual Exploitation and Abuse, which was held on January 26 this year. The picture shows the Secretary General at the center, his Chief of Staff on his right, his Undersecretary General for the Department of Field Services, Peacekeeping Operations on his left, the working group undoubtedly in attendance, and who's on the working group? The Special Representative of the Secretary General on Conflict and UNICEF. Do they not talk to each other? Do they not feel sufficiently aroused about sexual abuse of children in the Central African Republic at precisely the moment when they're discussing that subject? It's almost inconceivable. It's absolutely beyond belief. It is now clear that the Secretary General's investigation has to include UNICEF, particularly what happened to the information at headquarters and why wasn't it acted on, as well as the High Commission for Human Rights in Geneva and the entire Secretariat officialdom right up to the Secretary General in New York. It's really amazing. As a matter of fact, it takes the zero tolerance for sexual exploitation and abuse, which the Secretary General professes, and turns it into travesty. That was last week. I'm Stephen Lewis.